That day felt different from the moment my boss waved me off early with an unexpected smile. I remember walking out of the office, the city buzzing around me, thinking how rare it was to have this kind of gift. The sun was warm, the air carried a hint of autumn, and I decided to stop by the bakery for Ethan's favorite tiramisu. My heart felt light, almost girlish, as I imagined his surprised face when I told him I'd come home early. When I unlocked the door, the familiar scent of vanilla candles greeted me, the one I always left by the window. It felt cozy, safe, mine. From the living room, I caught faint sounds, laughter, maybe the TV running too loud. I tilted my head, smiling to myself, certain Ethan had fallen into one of his silly sitcom marathons. Without hesitation, I called out cheerfully, my voice carrying through the house, eager to see his smile and share my small victory of the day. "Honey, I'm home early today. The boss let me—" The word stuck in my throat, unfinished. My eyes landed on the couch and my world tilted. Laura, her shoes off, legs tucked casually, a glass of wine in her hand like this was her place. And Ethan, right beside her, his face pale, caught like a child with his hand in the cookie jar. I froze, my purse strap digging into my palm, the air suddenly heavy, suffocating, impossible to breathe in. For a moment, I couldn't trust my own eyes. My mind scrambled for an explanation, any reasonable excuse, but none came. It was Laura, Ethan's ex, the woman he swore had been left in the past, erased, nothing but a closed chapter. Yet here she was, in my living room, laughing as if this was some kind of reunion I had never been invited to. My chest tightened, my pulse hammering in my ears so loud I almost couldn't hear my own voice. "What is she doing here?" The words cracked as they left my mouth, trembling, fragile, yet sharper than glass. Ethan shot up from the couch, fumbling, his hands raised like he could physically hold back the truth. "Tatiana, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." His voice was desperate, shaky, drenched in guilt. My eyes burned, scanning his face, searching for the man I thought I knew, but all I saw was a stranger cornered in his own lie. And then Laura's smirk sliced through the tension, cruel and deliberate. She leaned back, swirling the wine in her glass like she was savoring my pain. "Actually," she said, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction, "it's exactly what it looks like." My breath caught, my throat tight. In that single moment, I felt my world split open. I wasn't just looking at betrayal. I was standing in the middle of it, blindsided in my own home. I felt my knees weaken, as if the floor beneath me had tilted without warning. My purse nearly slipped from my hand, but I clutched it tighter, using it like armor against the storm unraveling in front of me. My chest rose and fell too fast, the air in the room suddenly too thick, too heavy to breathe. I could see Ethan's lips moving, excuses tumbling out, but they blurred into noise. My focus was locked on Laura, her grin widening, feeding off my shock. Inside, memories clashed with reality. Every late night at work, every sacrifice I made to keep us afloat, every moment I believed we were building something solid together, it all mocked me now. The living room that once held laughter, dinners, and quiet Sunday mornings had turned into a crime scene of betrayal. And I was standing there, the unknowing witness, blindsided in my own home. My heartbeat pounded like a warning drum, urging me to run, scream, or shatter. But I didn't move. Not yet. I stood tall, even as my voice threatened to break, even as the walls felt like they were closing in. Ethan reached for me, his face desperate, pleading, but I stepped back, creating a chasm between us. My eyes, wet with rage and disbelief, locked onto his, demanding answers he could never give. And in that charged silence, I realized this was only the beginning of something I hadn't chosen. But I would see it through. I could feel the leather strap of my purse cutting into my hand, the pain grounding me as rage began to surge past the shock. My voice, colder than I'd ever heard it, sliced through the room. "Ethan, you promised me she was out of your life. You swore it." His face drained of color, and for a moment, he looked like a man stripped bare, no defenses left. But then, as always, He scrambled, grasping at excuses like a drowning man clutching at air. It was just talk. I was confused. I never meant... His words spilled out, clumsy, desperate. Each syllable only deepened the cut. I stared at him, the man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my everything, and all I saw was a stranger fumbling for lies. And then Laura's voice, smooth and poisonous, cut across his. Talk? That's a nice way of putting it. You should know, Tatiana. He never stopped calling me. Her smirk was the final twist of the knife. My body trembled, but not from weakness, from fury. I looked at her, then at him, and back again, my voice shaking but strong enough to hold. You let her into our home, into my life, and you expect me to stand here and swallow this? The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan took a step toward me, reaching out like I was still his to comfort, but I moved back, the disgust in my eyes louder than any words. He stood there, frozen, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for some miracle phrase to undo the wreckage. But nothing he said could erase what I had just seen. His eyes darted between me and Laura, wide and frantic, as if begging one of us to rescue him from the truth. For a second, I almost pitied him, a man unraveling under the weight of his own lies. Almost. But pity died quickly when betrayal stood in front of me in flesh and bone. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, louder than their voices, louder than anything else. My hands shook, not from fear, but from the effort of holding myself together. Every word I spoke felt like fire scorching through my throat. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To us? While I worked, while I sacrificed, you were sneaking pieces of yourself back to her. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. My calm fury cut sharper than any scream could. Laura chuckled under her breath, the sound so cruel it made my skin crawl. Don't be so dramatic, Tatiana. He never really got over me. You were just the in-between. The arrogance in her tone sent a wave of nausea through me. Ethan flinched at her words, but said nothing, and that silence was all the confirmation I needed. Whatever hope I'd clung to snapped right then. The man I thought was mine was already gone, and the life I thought I had was crumbling in his shadow. My chest ached as though every breath was being dragged through broken glass. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make them both feel even a fraction of what was clawing inside me. But I refused to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I stood taller, my voice steadier than I felt. You've humiliated me in my own home. Do you think I'll ever look at this room the same way again? Ethan reached out again, and I stepped back so fast it startled him. Tatiana, please. His voice cracked, desperate, but I couldn't stand to hear another lie fall from his lips. His words were worthless, cheap currency he'd spent too freely on her. I held his gaze, letting him see every ounce of the disgust he had earned. For years I had poured myself into this marriage, believing I was building something unbreakable. And in one night, with one betrayal, he had demolished it all. My silence hit him harder than any insult could. Laura sipped her wine, clearly enjoying the wreckage she'd helped create, but I refused to let her have the last word. You can sit there with your glass and your smug little smile, Laura. But remember this, he didn't just betray me, he betrayed himself. And when the dust settles, you'll be sitting next to a man who doesn't know the meaning of loyalty. Her smirk faltered, just slightly, and I felt a flicker of power return to me. And that flicker was enough to carry me forward. I couldn't stay there another second. My chest felt like it was being crushed under the weight of their presence, their laughter, their betrayal. Without a word, I turned on my heel and headed straight for the bedroom. I heard Ethan's footsteps scrambling after me, his voice echoing in the hallway, pleading like a child terrified of being left behind. My hands shook as I yanked the closet doors open, grabbing the first suitcase I could find. Tatiana, please, don't do this. We can work through it, he begged, his voice breaking, his breath short. I ignored him, my movements quick and sharp, tossing clothes into the open suitcase. Each folded shirt, each pair of shoes, was another piece of proof that I was done sacrificing, done forgiving, done waiting for him to be the man he promised he'd be. He hovered in the doorway, helpless, watching everything slip away from his grasp. I spun around, my anger erupting, my words slicing through the room. Work through it? You brought your ex into the house we built together. While I was out working to keep us afloat, you were here, betraying me. My voice cracked, but it didn't matter. The fury behind it was undeniable. He flinched as though my words were blows, and maybe they were. But no wound I could inflict on him would ever compare to the one he had carved into me. He stepped into the room, his hands trembling, his face pale like he was watching his life slip away right before his eyes. "It didn't mean anything," he stammered, his voice weak, almost pathetic. I froze for half a second, staring at him in disbelief. Didn't mean anything? The gall of it twisted my stomach. I let out a bitter laugh, one that sounded foreign even to my own ears. "It meant everything, Ethan, because it showed me exactly who you really are." The suitcase was half full, but my resolve was overflowing. Every shirt I shoved inside reminded me of the years I carried us financially, emotionally, spiritually. Every pair of shoes reminded me of the miles I had walked beside him, blindly trusting we were moving toward the same future. And now, here he stood, his excuses crumbling like sand slipping through desperate fingers. He looked smaller to me than he ever had, like a man caught in the wreckage of his own lies. He reached for me again, but I snapped the suitcase shut with a force that startled even me. The sound echoed in the room like a gavel, final and merciless. His lips trembled, forming words I didn't care to hear. For the first time, I didn't feel like the broken one in the room. I felt like the only person standing on solid ground. His betrayal had torn me open, yes, but it had also handed me clarity sharper than any blade. I stood there, my hand gripping the suitcase handle, my chest rising and falling like I had just run a marathon. Ethan's eyes were wet, his body leaning forward as if he could physically pull me back into the life we had shared. But that life was gone. I felt the burn of tears in my own eyes, but I refused to let them fall for him. Not anymore. He had already taken too much, and I wasn't going to let him take my dignity too. "Tatiana, please," he whispered, and for a fleeting second, I could hear the man I once loved hiding inside that voice. But I shook my head, clearing the illusion. That man was dead the moment he opened the door to Laura. What stood before me now was just the shell of someone who couldn't keep a promise. Someone who thought love could survive on lies. And I realized I didn't owe him my patience, my forgiveness, or even my tears. I rolled the suitcase toward the door, each step pounding like a drumbeat of finality. My heart was shattering, yes, but it was also hardening, reshaping into something stronger. Behind me, Ethan's pleas grew softer, fading into background noise I no longer cared to hear. The bedroom, the house, even the marriage felt like a prison I was finally stepping out of. And in that painful clarity, a thought began to spark, one that would soon become my revenge. I didn't collapse the way he expected me to. No wailing, no begging, no dramatic scene of heartbreak. Instead, I grew quiet, steady, calculating. While Ethan stumbled around with his flimsy apologies, I began to think about the things he had overlooked, the bank accounts, the emails, the little digital breadcrumbs he never thought I'd bother with. He assumed my silence was weakness, but in reality, it was the sound of me plotting my way out, and my way forward. That night, when he finally fell asleep on the couch, I sat in the glow of my laptop screen, my hands trembling not from despair but from focus. Every message, every photo, every email between him and Laura became evidence, each one a nail in the coffin of his defense. I even snapped a picture earlier, Laura in my living room, wine in hand, her smug grin stamped forever in my camera roll. Proof. Unshakable proof that he had underestimated me. Days turned into a quiet routine of documentation. While Ethan believed I was distant and hurt, I was actually preparing my arsenal. A folder tucked away, locked with a password only I knew, filled with everything a court would need to strip him of the comfort he took for granted. And I didn't stop there. I called a lawyer, one who had seen cases like mine and knew how to weaponize betrayal. Sitting across from her desk, I felt something I hadn't in weeks, power returning to me. I leaned across the polished oak desk, sliding the folder of evidence toward my lawyer. My voice was steady, but inside, my pulse beat like a war drum. "He thinks he can humiliate me in my own home," I said, my jaw tight. "I want him to lose everything he took for granted." She adjusted her glasses, flipping through the screenshots, the emails, the photo of Laura in my living room. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. She knew I had brought her dynamite. "With this," she said firmly, "the court will side with you, especially with the prenup clause you both signed." Hearing those words was like oxygen filling my lungs after weeks of drowning. Ethan had signed that prenup arrogantly, certain he'd never give me reason to use it, and now it was about to be the very rope that hanged him. I sat back in my chair, a slow smile curling across my lips. For the first time, I wasn't the victim. I was the architect. Walking out of her office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The city noise around me faded into background music, my heels clicking against the pavement like a declaration. Ethan thought betrayal had broken me, but it had forged me into something far stronger. Every step I took was a reminder. He had handed me the keys to his downfall, and I wasn't going to waste a single one. The game had shifted, and now I was holding all the cards. At home, I moved like a ghost in my own house, careful not to reveal what I knew. Ethan mistook my silence for distance, for the quiet of a wounded wife licking her scars. But I wasn't wounded anymore. I was sharpening my blade. I watched him scroll on his phone, his face lighting up at every hidden notification, clueless that every message was already mine. He thought he was clever, but I had already mapped out every step he'd taken. I began organizing my life around the inevitable. The bank accounts, once joint, would soon be mine. The house, the furniture, the car, all of it sat like pawns waiting to be claimed. And Ethan, poor Ethan, still believed he could win me back with flowers and half-hearted apologies. He had no idea I was sitting across the board, ready to call checkmate. Every time he smiled at me nervously, I smiled back, and he mistook it for hope. It was victory. One evening, staring at the growing pile of evidence in my hidden folder, I whispered to myself, "Perfect. Let him watch me walk away with everything he thought he'd keep." The words tasted sweet, like wine after a long day. It wasn't about the money or the house. It was about balance. He had tilted my world with betrayal, and I was setting it right again. And the best part, he wouldn't see it coming until it was too late. The day finally came when all the pieces I'd so carefully arranged snapped into place. I arrived home early again, but this time it wasn't to find betrayal. It was to deliver it. Ethan's belongings sat neatly packed in boxes on the porch, taped and labeled with the same precision he'd never shown me. The air was crisp, the kind that makes every sound sharper, every breath clearer. I stood in the doorway, calm and unshakable, waiting for him to walk into his own downfall. When his car pulled into the driveway, I felt no tremor of nerves, no pang of regret. Just stillness, like the quiet before a storm finally breaks. He climbed out, confusion etched across his face as his eyes darted from the boxes to me. "Tatiana, what is this? You can't just throw me out." His voice was indignant, as if he were the victim here. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it, but instead I simply handed him the envelope in my hand. "Divorce," I said flatly, watching his expression collapse in real time. "And thanks to your little reunion with Laura, the house, the accounts, all of it, mine." The silence that followed was exquisite. His face drained of color, his body stiffening as though the ground had opened under him. For once, he was speechless. I felt a calm smile spread across my face, not cruel, not hysterical, just certain. The kind of certainty he had stripped from me, now returned tenfold. His mouth finally opened, but what came out was nothing but frantic stammering. "Tatiana, please, I love you. Don't do this." The irony almost knocked the breath out of me. Love? If this was his version of love, I wanted no part of it. He clutched the papers like they were a death sentence, his hands shaking, his eyes wide with panic. I stood still, rooted, watching him crumble under the weight of consequences he never thought would arrive. "I should have thought of that before inviting her into my living room," I said, my voice smooth, steady and sharp. He flinched at the words, as if they were knives piercing what little pride he had left. He tried to step closer, but I raised my hand, stopping him cold. For years, I had been the one to shrink back, to accept, to forgive. But now, the roles had flipped. He was the beggar, and I was the one who decided when the curtain fell. He looked around, desperate, his gaze darting from the porch to the living room window, as if hoping for some kind of loophole in reality. There wasn't one. His belongings, boxed and taped, were proof that he no longer belonged here. My calmness rattled him more than anger ever could. He wanted tears, he wanted drama, he wanted proof that he still mattered. But all I gave him was silence, punctuated by the sound of me turning the lock on the door. He slammed his palm against the door as I shut it, his voice breaking through the wood. "Tatiana, don't do this. I can change, I'll do anything, please." The desperation in his tone was raw, almost animal, but instead of stirring sympathy, it only hardened me further. I leaned against the other side of the door, closing my eyes, letting the weight of the moment sink in. This wasn't cruelty. This was justice, long overdue and carefully delivered. I walked back into the living room, the very place where my world had shattered weeks before. Only now, it wasn't a scene of betrayal. It was a throne room. The wine glasses were gone, the laughter that had mocked me erased. I poured myself a glass of wine, watching the rich red swirl as if sealing the chapter shut. Each sip was a reminder. This was my space, my life, my freedom reclaimed. Ethan's ghost no longer had power here. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of him standing by his car, shoulders slumped, papers in hand, the weight of his downfall pressing in. For a moment, I let myself absorb the sight. Then I turned away, my smile calm, my heart steady. The door was locked, the boxes were out, and the past was finished. I raised my glass slightly, a private toast to the woman I had become. And though I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, I knew one thing for certain. It would be mine. Months later, I sat at a cafe terrace, the sun warming my shoulders, a cappuccino in front of me, and a book open in my hands. The air smelled of roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries, a scent that wrapped me in comfort. My reflection in the cafe window almost startled me. I looked brighter, lighter, like someone who had shed years of weight. Friends passed by, waving, stopping to chat, and I felt surrounded, supported, seen. For once, my life was mine alone, and it was enough. I smiled into my cup, an inner voice whispering truths I had earned the hard way. I thought betrayal would break me, but it set me free. I didn't need to carry Ethan's lies anymore, didn't need to live with the constant shadow of wondering if he truly loved me. That chapter had closed, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I had discovered a strength I didn't know I had, forged in the fire of heartbreak and sharpened by the sweet blade of revenge. Of course, word trickled back to me about Ethan and Laura. They had tried to make something of their reunion, but it crumbled within weeks, eaten alive by jealousy, arguments, and the weight of their own guilt. Financial struggles tore at him, his reputation collapsed, and soon enough, he was a man adrift, jobless and bitter. I heard he had tried calling me late at night, but I never answered. His voice no longer had any claim over me. One evening, I ran into him at the supermarket. I was picking out oranges when I felt a presence behind me, and there he was, Ethan. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes hollow, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. The confident man who once strutted through life was gone, replaced by someone worn down, smaller, desperate. He looked at me as though I was the only piece of stability left in his world. "Tatiana," he said, his voice hoarse, almost breaking. "I made a mistake. Please, let's try again." The plea hung in the air, heavy, but it didn't touch me the way it once would have. I studied him, truly studied him, and saw not a partner, not a love, but a cautionary tale. He had gambled our life for a fleeting thrill, and this broken man standing before me, was the cost. For the first time, I felt nothing but clarity. I let out a soft chuckle, shaking my head slowly, my lips curving into the faintest smile. No, Ethan. You made your choice when you opened that door to her. Losing you wasn't my punishment, it was my blessing. His face crumpled, but I didn't linger on it. I set my basket down, lifted my chin, and walked past him with steps that felt lighter than air. And in that moment, I knew. I wasn't running from the past anymore. I was walking straight into my future. When I stepped out of that supermarket, the evening air felt crisp, almost celebratory. I wasn't carrying groceries, but I was carrying something far more valuable: peace. The weight that had once pressed down on my chest was gone. Every breath came easier, every step lighter. I thought of the woman I had been, loyal, trusting, blind, and I almost wanted to reach back through time to tell her, "Hold on, you'll come out of this stronger than you can imagine." Life moved forward, and so did I. My mornings became slower, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of birds instead of anxious silence. My evenings belonged to me, to books, to laughter with friends, to quiet walks where my thoughts no longer circled around betrayal. People asked me how I was doing, and I didn't hesitate when I answered. Free. Not healing, not surviving. Free. And that word carried more sweetness than any love Ethan ever offered me. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I still hear the echo of his pleading voice, the knock on the door, the desperate calls I never answered. But it no longer unsettles me. It reminds me of everything I've reclaimed: my dignity, my independence, my joy. I raise my glass of wine some nights, toasting not to revenge, but to freedom. Because in the end, that was the real victory. Not what I took from him, but what I finally gave back to myself.